business, and I've got one too. You can't mind your business. What's the matter with you?
Welcome to the latest episode of the Brand Shorthand Podcast. I'm your host, Mark Vandergrift, and with me today is Big Trouble, Lorraine Kessler.
That's true.
Thing one, we are back as our second part of
Mhm.
talking about the book Big Brands, Big Trouble,
Mhm.
and updating it for our new 2024 edition by Lorraine and Mark.
Yeah.
So as we mentioned last week, this book came out in October of 2001,
Mhm.
just 4 weeks after 9/11. And we decided to do a revisit because we keep hearing of big brands today making the same mistakes that Jack codified 23 years ago. So if you recall, last week we had 9 mistakes that Big Brands, Big Trouble cover. And just to put it on the screen again, the mistakes are the Me Too mistake, the What Are You Selling mistake, the Truth Will Win Out mistake, the Other Guy's Idea mistake, which is where we'll start today, the idea of going opposite, which is Lorraine clarified last week, is not actually a mistake, but just a move that you make if you're number 2. Number 6, the we're very successful mistake. Number 7, the everything for everybody mistake. Number 8, the live by the numbers mistake, or what we also call the Wall Street mistake. And number 9, the not attacking yourself mistake. Now, if you need a dictionary definition or a Lorraine definition of these, just watch last week's episode where we gave a short description for each of these mistakes. And then we started to cover each mistake with some examples of brands that either made the mistake in the past or are doing so today. So last week we dove deep on Me Too mistake, the What Are You Selling mistake, and the Truth Will Win Out mistake. So we're going to pick up with number 4 today. And Lorraine, I usually take a rabbit trail somewhere else, but we're not going to do that today because we have 5 more mistakes to cover. Plus, we're going to add our own big trouble mistakes to this list that we think Jack would accept if we were still around today.
Yeah.
So let's start on number 4, and we'll cover the Other Guy's Idea mistake, or what you might call the copying mistake.
Right.
So Lorraine, give us some brands and some more detail on this particular mistake.
Yeah. This mistake really relates to trying to own the same idea that a competitor owns in the same category. So a couple of examples. One that shows how this doesn't work, and one that shows when this can work. So the one that doesn't work, which is most times the case, so I want to make that point to anyone listening, is Duracell and Eveready. Right? Duracell came out and they only focused on one type of battery, the alkaline battery, and it was long lasting. Eveready makes all different types of batteries, and they tried to follow Duracell to own the same idea, longer lasting, with the Energizer Bunny. Well, people know the Energizer Bunny, but they still credit Duracell, according to research, with longer lasting batteries. So, that's a mistake where I don't think it works out. So if someone in your category has the same idea and they're saying it really the same way, it's not wise to go after that, particularly if they have more share of voice and more time in the market, have spent more, and have been fairly clear with how they've advertised their message. Now, a case where this worked is really Subaru versus Volvo. Volvo, as you and I know, we used to be able to ask 20 years ago in our sessions, what car is known for safety, or what's a safe car? And most people, almost, I would say 9 out of 10 at that time, would say Volvo. And then if you said what's Volvo's position, most would be able to reverse that and say, well, they make safe cars. So that was pretty tight. But as the years went on and we would do that in the Appreciative Discovery, the response got all mixed.
Mm-hmm.
And it might be 5 to 10 versus 9 to 10. And that's because Volvo hasn't done a terrific job continuing to own its idea. And Subaru comes along, and as well as it's, they started out with a car, I think, that had more about affordability,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yep.
A quality car for less, something like that. But they've quickly shifted to more of a safety proposition. And I think it's the new Subaru ad that has an accident and the child and the husband emerge unscathed. That's not, you would think that should be a Volvo ad.
Yeah.
So I think you can take an idea, the other guy's idea, if the other guy abandons it.
Mm-hmm.
But generally, it's not a good idea to do if that idea is still vibrant and in the market.
Very good. Yeah, it's interesting because Kia has also tried to do that, but they just do it with safety ratings.
Yeah.
And I think ratings are, I don't know, they go right in one ear and out the other now.
Yeah.
I like that Subaru is taking the deeper meaning of safety, which is protection of life, and
Right.
and dramatizing that. Because who came out with the crash dummy ads? Volvo,
Volvo.
right? Who
Right.
came out with the front and side airbags, right? Not at the same time,
Yeah.
but you had front airbags was Volvo, then the side airbags was Volvo.
Right.
The way the frames were made for receiving impact and the shock that it took, that was Volvo. But they just completely got away from that. And I think all they're pushing now is style of some sort.
Yeah, which of course
All-
is
That's all relative, right?
Right.
You know, your style is different than my style. That's why we buy different clothes.
Right.
You know, so from a car standpoint, trying to copy what they're doing is just deadly.
Yeah.
So this isn't a hard one to understand, but even today we have clients that say, well, you know, ABC company over here is doing this, we need to do that. And that's just a copying mistake that is deadly. But like you said, if I do this, you immediately like want to do that. It's innate in us. So we really have to fight this mistake because we're built to copy because we think that's the way things work out.
Yeah.
Because it's safe. Someone else did it. So now if I do it, I'll at least be safe.
Right. That urge to copy is such a human reaction, as you said. But what it leads to in brand categories is commoditization.
Mm-hmm.
And then it messes up kind of the profit margin for everybody at that point.
Well, the one that I think is funny, and they must have the same agency, but it just doesn't come out the same way. So, you know, the toilet paper brand,
Oh,
if I say it, you'll know it. And I'll say For the Go, right?
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, now one of the hotel brands is using For the Stay.
Well, you know, when you're in the stay, you probably are going to need For the Go. So it's
I don't remember who it is. I know Charmin's For the Go, right?
Yeah.
But I can't remember which hotel brand, and I should, but I don't because I think it's such a bad application of the same. It's a copied idea that just doesn't work real well.
And this may be off a little bit, but Charmin had one of when it was introduced, right? Mr. Whipple, and it was so soft
Oh
he
yeah,
couldn't help. Mr. Whipple, for those who don't know, because this was years ago, was a grocer in a grocery store who couldn't keep his hands off the Charmin because it was
yeah.
so soft. I thought it was the most annoying, dumb commercial I ever saw, but it was effective as heck. And this is a point for anyone doing advertising. It's not whether you like it, we always ask the wrong question, so we get the wrong answer. We might ask a client when we're presenting a concept, which one do you like? That is totally the wrong question.
Mm-hmm.
It's which one do you think will be most effective in
Yeah.
getting or conveying the product benefit? Effectiveness and likability can be two very different things.
Yep. Very good. Yeah, it's a good thing to bring out. Okay, let's go to the next mistake, number 5.
Hmm.
This isn't the mistake. This is the clarifying one you
Right,
mentioned last week. And that is, if you're not number 1, then go opposite if you're
right,
number 2.
right.
And so that's from Marketing Warfare, by the way. I think you asked last week where you remember that. But from Marketing Warfare,
Hmm.
know your place in the category. If you're not number 1 or number 2, do something new.
Right,
Well, this impacts number 2. The leader attacks, number 2 goes opposite of number 1, and then the others flank with something new, or they go guerrilla, which is narrow the battlefield to where you can have, superiority of force.
right.
So we have a really good example of this, I think, which is Hertz, Avis, and Enterprise. So give us an example of going opposite with them.
Hertz was first to mind in the category with some powerful advertising in the age of mass media when everybody had 3 TV networks. And their idea was we put you in the driver's seat, so it was a pretty good idea. And they had a very dramatic way of showing that. They actually had a guy kind of dropped into a car, a convertible. It was I still remember the commercial today. So Avis comes along, and one of the things that they were brilliant in identifying is even leaders have vulnerabilities, right? You can't be all things to all people. So if you're a leader and you're strong here, you're going to have an inverse weakness. Let's call it that. An inherent weakness is the best term, because inherent is a weakness you can't fix without giving up your leadership.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So it's not just being friendly, or it's just, it's not just that. It has to be something else. So what Avis noticed is, just by observation when they went to airports and whatever, Hertz had the long line, which meant it took a lot longer to get a car. And so they basically came out with a service message that was, come to Avis, our lines are shorter. That's kind of
Mm-hmm.
how it first started. And then they morphed into this whole service position about Avis being a better customer service experience. And so that was genius. They attacked an inherent weakness in the leader's strength. And that's a principle. So anybody listening should write that down. Attack an inherent weakness in the leader's strength. And they did it in such a way that Hertz couldn't really respond quickly to. And of course, this is a day before technology. Today, that'd be a little dicey because technology allows a lot of marketers to adapt a lot quicker to problems like that. Because you could do boarding or pre-car on an iPad today. You couldn't do that then. So that was a brilliant example.
Yeah, and then Enterprise, speaking of flanking, this doesn't necessarily speak to the go opposite move,
Yeah,
but Enterprise did flank them by coming out with We Pick You Up. So they changed the service model, just like, Uncola to Pepsi and Coke, 7 Up comes out with the Uncola. You have to really, really be different if you're not number 1 or number 2. So
yeah.
just a really good example. The younger people probably won't remember Hertz, Avis, and Enterprise in their great years of advertising, but you can certainly find all their ads on YouTube.
Well, and as I said, Avis kind of morphed from, our lines are shorter to we're number 2. We try harder, which
Mm-hmm.
made them very endearing to the public. It was kind of this humility with,
Underdog.
right.
Yep.
And what happened is, as I was saying before about Volvo and Subaru, they stopped trying harder.
Yeah.
So Enterprise found that little piece of turf that they could own, which is, if you're really trying harder, deliver the car to my house.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah. Yeah, that was great.
mhm,
Good. Okay. Well, number 6, and you kind of just touched on it by
mhm,
resting on your laurels. Number 6 is the we're very successful mistake.
right,
Success often leads to arrogance or complacency, if you want to look at it that way. and then arrogance to failure. So I think one that we could mention that falls into this, I think you were thinking Yeti and Stanley Cup. So give us some perspectives on that.
Sure. Well, Yeti jumped on the scene. What? I don't know. My concept of years is messed up. I might say
Let's
5
just
years
say a
ago,
decade ago.
10 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeti jumped on the scene and leapfrogged Coleman, right? Coleman was the standard in coolers and had all these cool coolers and a neat name. A fabulous name, and all these new looking products, and charged a premium price. And all of a sudden, everything's Yeti, Yeti, Yeti. And then they got caught flat footed. And this is what happens when we're very successful. You start to stop innovating. You start to stop continually to bring seeing yourself as leading rather than leader. And you kind of get caught checking your balance sheet instead of checking the market. And so all of a sudden, Stanley Cup, who also was leapfrogged, Stanley was an old school brand and whatever, comes up with this cup that has taken the world by storm. I mean, I got one as a gift from Innis Majori for its 50th anniversary. It's almost too heavy for me to lift. It's like I use it in weightlifting, actually, because it's
5 pound weights.
Once I fill it, it's like 5 pounds. But it's just amazing how there's this back and forth, and Yeti kind of got schooled on its own lesson by Stanley Cup. So I think that's a good one. But I happened to work in the early part of my career with some companies that really suffered from this problem. One was Sears. I used to call in Sears Automotive in the tower in downtown Chicago. And the buyers, we would talk about the future and how to do this and how to market their automotive services differently and new ideas. And the buyers were totally disinterested. Just totally disinterested. And I could not understand it. And my clients who brought me along were like, they're making a good salary and he's 55 years old, really doesn't care, right? We're 60 years old, not going to be there. And that's that's a real problem. And I think a lot of people won't remember, but it's a point of history that's really important. The big three automakers in the time, in the 70s, GM, Ford, and Chrysler, the big three CEOs met with Richard Nixon in the White House for the purpose of stopping imports to this country, to try and stave off imports that were coming from largely then from Honda, who identified that there was a market for smaller cars, more fuel efficient, smaller cars. That's an example of the big three who got really stuck in their leadership and thinking that monolithically they could control the whole market forever. And I was just thinking about this the other day. One of the companies that was in Canton, Ohio, that I think fell victim to this is Hoover.
Oh, yeah.
The Hoover vacuum was absolutely the most unevolved piece of machinery that I, as a homeowner or homemaker, terrible word for me to use, somebody's going to say homemaker. What
You're allowed to use it, Lorraine.
But it just was so old, and the only way you could own a Hoover, and this is a good example, we were talking in the other version of this, part one, I think about Kodak and digital. This is another good example of a company that refused to attack itself. Hoover, their whole thing was protecting their dealers. So they kept selling you really heavy metal vacuums that you had to take to a dealership when it broke. People don't want to do that.
Yeah.
They want vacuums for good or bad. It's not my place to judge people who want a disposable. It doesn't work. Yeah. Get rid of it, buy a new one. I don't want to have to look for a service station, wait for a belt, wait for a mechanic. But I'm thinking, then Dyson came along and totally shook up the market with its technology, which actually I actually believe that technology was an early Hoover technology. They never capitalized on it, I believe.
Yeah. Yep.
So Dyson,
the Vortex.
Right. And I think Hoover's the one that first, but they didn't bring it to market. So now you have Dyson doing that. But guess what? There's an opening here. Dysons are super pricey.
Mm-hmm.
They're overly expensive. Now what's happened is one Chinese company has bought like all these brands like Shark, and they own like, I don't know, 3, 4 brands, and they've commoditized them all. So they have very similar technology and looks and whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And they're terrible. They're not good at all. So I think there's opportunity for someone to come along with an affordable Dyson technology, one that really hits a higher volume market. So
Yep.
someone out there, I think that's the opportunity.
Very
And
good.
just don't call it Hoover.
Right.
Yeah, get a new name, something sexy.
Great. Well, this next one is certainly going to be easy to explain to a lot of people because I think most big brands have done this.
Hmm.
And that is number 7, the everything for everybody mistake, trying to be all things to all people and what we like to call unfocusing. So, Lorraine, give us a few examples
Right.
and then we can continue on this one probably for a while.
Yeah. Yeah, well, what's happened is that there's been enormous sophistication in the markets, as we've grown up, and in part because of all the competition too. But basically, this principle is that you can only stand for one thing in the mind.
Mhm.
Now, in the early days of the positioning works that Trout and Race did, they seem to equate this one idea to one product category, right?
Mhm.
So ketchup is ketchup, and mustard is mustard, and mayonnaise is mayonnaise, and etc. And there's still some value to that. And the idea that they talked about was if you stand for, and I think Trout used Heinz, and he said they used
Mhm.
to be number one in pickles, right? And then they got big into ketchup, and that's what they promoted more. And now they're ketchup and pickles, they're number 2,
Classic.
right?
Yeah.
And so it's not that line extension, which is the number one reason for unfocus
Hmm.
within a branded in the branded space, not talking about companies that get diversified, but just talking about product categories that have brands. The main problem is it's not that it's always terrible. It's that it has to be done intelligently and with really a lot of thinking about what does the brand stand for. And I'll give you an example because we now today know mega brands, what I call mega
Hmm.
brands, that have enormous varieties of products and even own a whole space in the grocery store or in the home goods store. And we know them. Lysol is one of the brands.
Hmm.
Like Swiffer is one of those
Hmm.
brands. Um, and Tide is one of these brands. Why does line extension work? I think it does work for those brands. Why? It works because the idea they own isn't just laundry detergent, or it isn't just Swiffer a mop, like one single product,
Hmm.
or Lysol one way to clean your bathroom and kitchen and toilet bowl. They own a bigger idea, like Lysol's kill germs, and Tide is simply the leader in laundry.
Whitening. Yeah.
Right?
And they're
And
whitening. Yeah.
not everything whitens. The original Tide is all about whitening, but some are about now allergy,
Hmm.
good for allergy, and some are about scent. But but the line is they really are the leader in laundry, and whatever they come up with, you can trust is going to be the best. And then Swiffer is easy cleaning.
Hmm.
And so these mega brands have been able to do line extension because within that concept it works. But I'll tell you where it wouldn't work. I don't think it would work if Lysol went into laundry.
Hmm.
I don't think it would work if Swiffer went into toilet bowl cleaners, right?
Yep.
And I don't think it would work if Tide went into surface cleaners,
Right.
right? So that's where the line extension starts to break down. And so what you have to think about is what do people think is logical? Is it logical for Lysol to add a wipe to their line as well as a spray, as long as it cleans surfaces and toilets and bathrooms and kitchen? Yes. Does it make sense for Lysol to have laundry detergent?
Mm.
it starts to get squishy. And so the caution is for marketers is the more you add, the more you detract. So you have to really have a tight focus and try and manage it um, with a lot of astuteness to where the customer and the competition will allow you to move.
Yeah, I think we on the Super Bowl we had a couple examples again because we were talking Uber Eats versus DoorDash,
Hmm.
and both of them are spreading their wings, if you want to call it that.
Right.
And I think you felt like DoorDash would win that war because of the fact that they delivered food
Hmm.
and now they're getting into delivering everything versus Uber was a taxi service, a different kind of taxi service, but now they're trying to get into delivering everything.
Yeah,
So,
exactly. And that's a really, here's how simple that is. Uber equals taxi, alternative to taxi. That's how the mind thinks. And DoorDash equals delivery.
yeah,
So now I'm trying to say Uber's delivery, like transporting people is delivering people. Doesn't really work,
a little
right?
harder. Yep.
Delivering baby people is called babies. I mean, it just doesn't work, right? And it may seem overly simplistic, but that's really the concept of how the mind works.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think another one you saw recently, well, two, there was Panera bread and there was Rao's sauce.
Oh
So
yeah.
speak of those.
Well, Raos, I think, has gone bonkers crazy
Yeah.
beyond what I would call mega brands space. Because they've gone into so many things like balsamic oil, even some aprons and spoons, and gosh, frozen entrees, dinners, frozen
Mhm.
pizza. Uh, and while you,
Soup.
I mean, that's an expansion beyond what I think makes sense. I think it's devolving the brand. It's pulling away from the brand's roots as a great Italian sauce pasta. You could go with the pasta and the sauce; they go great. But and like I said, it's not only what the consumer will allow you to do mentally, but it's the competition. They just went into the frozen pizza space, which is so competed,
Yeah.
and has DiGiorno, who really has a high stock. So what would happen is people within Raos might argue, but that's sales we can pick up. We can pick up sales. At some point, there's a cost to those sales you're picking up in the long term in how it devolves the brand. How well can you market to own a mind share in that category? Not very well if you're spread that thin.
Well, and what does it correspond to? It corresponds to Campbell's buying Rao's,
Right,
and now this is what they're doing with the brand.
right,
And it's because Campbell's can't think any other way. They got to be all things to all people or this everything for everybody mistake.
right. And I think that that's going to really hurt their cachet as being
Yeah.
part of Campbell's. I think they were sold for like what, 2 billion or something.
Yeah.
But they had the Sovos that bought them from the original, I think Rayo's family had taken them up to 600 million and
Hmm.
believed they could be $1 billion brand. I
Yeah.
just think they're going too far too fast, and it will end up cutting into the mystique of the brand. And I know that's for people who are dollars and cents and accountants and controllers. They don't understand that. They don't understand how powerful mystique is
Right.
because it's so hard to quantify. But once you lose it, then there's it's you don't get it back.
Yep.
Yeah, at least not easily.
That's for sure.
Hmm.
Well, Lorraine, we got through number 7 today,
Okay.
and we still have 2 more mistakes to go from big brands, big trouble, as well as a few of our own.
Hmm.
So next week is the big eclipse, which goes right through our neck of the woods here on
Right.
April 8th.
Forgot about.
So next week we'll talk a little bit about that, and then we'll also finish out number 8, number 9 mistakes. And then
Okay.
I believe, if I'm not incorrect, we have 4 or 5 of our own mistakes that we're going to add to our 2024 edition
Right.
of Big Brands, Big Trouble.
Right.
So again, I hope you stay out of big trouble this week, Lorraine. Easter
I
was yesterday, so hopefully, It was all good.
I was, actually.
Good. Very good. And thanks to our listeners for joining us today. If you haven't liked, shared, subscribed, or told your friends about the Brand Shorthand podcast, please do. Until next time, have an amazing day.
Business but my own.